Hello everyone, back tuning in to today's second video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days for today's second video, which will take us to around the 5th of May. We'll be able to extend out beyond that though with the extended GFS and ECM ensembles. We're into around a couple of weeks. Have a look at Beijing Climate Centre for the next 40 days today. That's going to take us into the early part of June. Can you believe? The first video up, though, today was the JMA 3-monthly update. So that's taking us through May, June and July, well into the summer with the long-range season model from the Japanese Meteorological Agency. And there are hints that we could be in for some pretty hot weather as we go into the summer. So have a look at that. It's here on the homepage. Just scroll down a little bit, you'll find it above the pollen count. Coming up tonight, we're going to have the third update for the May Day bank holiday weekend. Right, so we're going to start off with the central England temperatures. This is how we are currently looking provisional up to yesterday, 24th of April. We're standing at 9.4, an anomaly of 1.8 degrees above average. I expect this to tick down a little bit over the next few days, but it is going to be another warmer than average month, definitely going to be above average once again, to go along with February, which came in at 3 degrees above average, and March, which came in at 2.1 degrees above average. I suspect this will probably finish up around a little bit above 1 degree above average. So also month by month we're shaving off around a degree off our anomaly. But yeah, it is going to be another milder than average month quite easily, I think. Remember, that is provisional up to 24th. It is subject to corrections, and normally the correction is downwards by a couple of tenths of a degree. So it probably finishes up somewhere high 8s, I would have thought, in the end, maybe 8.7, 8.8, something in that area. But we shall see when we get through to the end of the month. Right, these are the 500 millibar height anomaly flowcharts from the Penn State University. We've got the ECMWF on the top, and the GFS, which we will have a look at in a moment, is on the bottom. 500 millibars, 85 feet. Is an area in the atmosphere where high pressure and low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream. Red extrapolates to above average heights, which is high pressure. Blue to below average heights, which is low pressure. So the ECMWF in the 7 to 10 day time frame is placing a ridge of above average heights over and to the west of the UK and extending it back into northern blocking, which is sitting over the top of the North Pole. There's a trough of below average heights through Scandinavia. Let's change the colour to red. Below average heights through Scandinavia and down into northeastern parts of Europe, and quite a deep trough in the middle of the Atlantic as well. Flow on the jet will go something a bit like that. So it is a block situation. The main thing is that there will be a lot of dry weather on offer, and we're just on the periphery of some quite cold northerly winds. The main northerly shot is going down into Scandinavia. We're on the periphery of that. Probably mainly dry temperatures, could be a bit chilly by night, probably quite pleasant by day in the May sunshine, and the main thing of course is pretty dry conditions. GFS is very similar, so again we've got this deep trough in over northeastern parts of Europe through Scandinavia and into sort of a Baltic area in the west of Russia, and then we are dominated by this big ridge of above average heights that again is sitting over and to the north of the UK, extending back into really extensive northern blocking, actually higher pressures through Greenland and up into the North Pole. Again, we're just on the periphery of a cold northerly shot that's plunging down through Scandinavia, northeastern parts of Europe. We're just on the edges of that, being protected quite a lot by that big area of above average heights. Again, the main thing with that is very dry conditions. The Atlantic is blocked off, so as we go into the early part of May, we could be seeing an increasing trend for dry weather. Temperatures a little bit up for grabs depending on how much of that northerly wind we pull in. Then we go through to the upper air temperature and precipitation. Ensembles next. So this is how the upper air temperatures and precipitation are looking with the GFS ensembles for London. So not much going on with temperatures actually. We're very close to average at the moment. We're going to go a bit colder than average over weekend into the beginning of next week, and then through next week actually the temperature lifts up a little bit, but again not a big deviation, close to average and we keep it generally quite close to, or maybe ending up being slightly below average actually through the first week of May. Precipitation wise, we've got more unsettled weather to come over the next few days. There will be showers or longer spells of rain into the weekend. Looks particularly disturbed Friday night, Saturday morning, when it could be gale force winds across western, southwestern parts of the country. Through next week, probably a drying trend, if anything. So looking pretty dry actually through the first week of May, even if temperatures are a bit on the low side. Into second week of May, possibly a bit more unsettled then. But again, bear in mind that is right at the extended range of the GFS Ensemble, so it's really unreliable. Right, I had a preview of this a couple of minutes ago, but here we go. Temperature anomalies from the 25th of April to the 3rd of May are forecast to be close to, or maybe ever so slightly below average, particularly so for England and Wales. I think for Scotland, maybe on the slightly above average side, but it's not a big deviation anywhere, really. It's close to average, but probably erring a little bit more on the side of slightly below average, particularly for England and Wales. Precipitation anomalies from the 25th of April to the 3rd of May, very close to average again. So not a big deviation with either temperature or precipitation in the week ahead. This hour, the GFS 6 o'clock run is looking for Saturday, so that's the troublemaker low. That's going to bring some very wet and windy weather from Friday through to Saturday. By 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, that's heading off into the North Sea, so we get rid of that quite quickly. And then as we go through into next week, high pressure building over to the east of the country, coming quite a major blocking area of high pressure through the course of next week, with 1,030 millibar area of high pressure sitting just to the north of the country, bringing lots of dry and fine weather. Into the second half of next week, that high pressure tries to get itself up towards Greenland. This is that cold northerly shot that I talked about, just starting to push down into Scandinavia. Again, we are being protected from that northerly shot primarily by this ridge. We are bringing in a little bit of air from the north, particularly to eastern parts of the country. So certainly at nights could start getting a bit colder. But the worst of that northerly shot is going down into Scandinavia. That's how things look at the end of next week. This is Friday, 3rd of May, just approaching the May Day Bank Holiday weekend. And by the way, May Day Bank Holiday update number 3 will be with you tonight. So Friday the 3rd of May, we find that area of high pressure again blocking around Greenland and Iceland. It is turning wind into the northeast, so some colder areas certainly starting to move across the North Sea there. And possibly as we go into the bank holiday weekend, it could turn quite cold across eastern parts of the country. Although all the while in the west, we are close to average of high pressure, just fending off the worst of those northerly winds. So there's just a chance, a bit of a cold snap. I think it will be most evident at night. There's a chance some really quite cold nights, maybe some more damaging night frost, dare I say it. We've got a little bit beyond day 10 to bank holiday Monday, the 6th of May, and the broad scenario continues really. We've got high pressure again over Greenland and Iceland, so we've still got this blocking feature up to our north and northwest. At the same time, low pressure is moving through Scandinavia. And again, we're just on the periphery of pulling down cold northerly winds. Most of the cold air is moving into Scandinavia away to our northeast, but we are just on the edges of it. In the more extended range, the high pressure begins to relocate to our south. That's a warmer direction. So as we go into the second week of May, this GFS run starts to warm things up considerably. This is Saturday the 11th of May, with high pressure band reaching through the country, but its centre is to the south. And so instead of pulling down cold northerly winds just to our northeast, actually what is going on now is that we're bringing up warmer southwesterly winds into our area of high pressure. So it's a reposition of the high pressure in the second week of May, turning things a good deal warmer, and still a lot of dry weather on offer. This is the GFS Parallel Run. Parallel Run will become the main operational GFS in June. This is how things are looking on Sunday. On Sunday, we begin to build up a ridge of high pressure, bringing a mainly dry day, but it could be showery rain up in the north and west. Early next week, high pressure increasingly influential. Now, the parallel run doesn't get that high pressure as far north as the operational GFS. So this is how things are looking at the end of next week. Instead of having that high pressure centred over Greenland and Iceland, where the operational GFS has it, the parallel GFS has it centred over top of the UK. Obviously, that's a warmer position for the high pressure. We're still pulling down cold air into Scandinavia and the Baltic part of Europe, northeastern Europe, but it's a lot further east and northeast with the parallel compared to the operational run. So there's no sort of chance of being on the periphery of that cold air with that scenario. Most of the cold air is well away from us to our northeast. We're under that area of high pressure, bringing no doubt a lot of dry, fine and pretty warm spring-like weather really in the early May sunshine. So again, we've still got these questions to answer for next week. It really is proving very, very problematical next week. I mean, we're at Thursday now. So we're not all that far away from next week at all, just 4 days away from it. And we still have big disagreements, actually, in the overall sort of synoptic setup for next week, even between the GFS operational and parallel runs. So things are really, really uncertain for next week, in terms of the broad pattern anyway, if not in terms of the actual weather, because either way, whether that high pressure is centred over Greenland, Iceland, or whether it's centred over the UK, either area is still going to produce a lot of dry weather next week, so we can say definitively, I think now, that next week's going to be pretty dry. Temperatures do depend a lot though on the position of that high pressure. The operational run is very close to pulling in those cold northerly winds, whereas the parallel run, I think that's a much warmer type scenario. Now we're getting up towards day 10, and this looks really good for the bank holiday weekend. So this is taking us to Sunday the 5th of May, and then on to Monday the 6th, bank holiday Monday. Again, we're under that area of high pressure. It's centred just to our east. We're pulling in dry, fine conditions from the east, and pretty warm temperatures with that as well. So that's another cracking bank holiday weekend being signalled by the GFS parallel run today. The operational GFS isn't bad for next weekend, really. Just temperatures would be a little bit lower, especially so at night. But they're both singing from the same hymn sheet, really, which is for a lot of dry weather for the bank holiday weekend once more. Can we avoid another bank holiday washout? It looks like we might do at the moment. And then as we go into the second week of the month, second week of May, we begin to re-establish a westerly flow, so it's up to a bit more unsettled, rather more showery up to the north and west. ECMWF, again, we've got this high pressure building over the weekend and into next week. The high pressure increasingly building close to the country. It's trying to get itself northwards through the course of next week, trying to pull down those colder winds from the north. Most of the cold air, again, is plunging down into Scandinavia, however. Have got a lot of northern blocking around Greenland and Iceland, but it extends down into this region just to the west of the UK. So that's keeping us mainly dry through the course of next week. Temperatures probably very pleasant in the May sunshine. Up to day 10, the high pressure begins to sink southwards, centering itself over top of the country for the May Day bank holiday weekend, and so that will be another dry and warm, maybe very warm bank holiday weekend being signalled there. It really does look as though things are improving very, very rapidly now for the May Day bank holiday weekend. We'll have more on that in tonight's third update. These are the options that are on the table for, that's the third update for May Day bank holiday weekend, by the way. So these are the options that are on the table within the ECM ensembles today for day 10. This is the 5th of May, 240 hours away. And this is from the Icelandic Met Office. So you've got 14 members of the ECM ensembles, which includes the operational run. That's the run we're just looking at, that have high pressure just out to west of us, but also extending up to the north and back towards some northern blocking. Low pressure is to our east and northeast, with this trough sinking through Scandinavia and northeastern parts of Europe. Flow and the jet is going something a bit like that. So, a lot of dry weather on off with that. Probably not a heat wave, but pretty dry. And in the May sunshine, quite warm. Then there's another 13 that actually have the high pressure centred over the top of the UK. So that's kind of like what the parallel run is showing. Parallel GFS run. And the flow of jets like that. That's a dry and warm scenario. It could be very warm even with that one. There's 12 that have the high pressure, again, to our west, similar to the operational ECM run, but a little bit stronger with taking that high pressure further north. That means that we are closer to that northerly shot that's sinking through Scandinavia and northern parts of Europe. So there's the trough there, sinking through Scandinavia and northern Europe. We're closer to those cold northerly winds with these 12 just here. A lot of options on the table. There is 6, but actually has us under that northerly wind. So these 6, they're a minority option, only 6 of them, but they have a strong area of high pressure around Greenland and they have this trough of low pressure centred over the top, almost over the top of the UK. That's unsettled, and also cold, bring winds in from a north or northeasterly direction. Now, there's only 6 of those, but obviously can't be entirely discounted. And then there's a further 6 that are more zonal. They have high pressure to the south of the UK, low pressure to the north, and they're bringing in a westerly flow. I think it's these ones up here, the 14 there, the 13 there, and the 12 there, that are most likely to occur, which is the high pressure to be either over or just to the west of the UK, signalling a lot of dry weather, temperatures pleasantly warm in May sunshine, but with a cold shot just to our northeast over Scandinavia. I think that is the most likely scenario at day 10. In 2 weeks' time, these are the options that we've got. This is the 10th of May, so we have 17 members of the ECM ensembles by then, with high pressure again centred almost over top of the country. 13 with high pressure to our southwest, just a little bit more influence from low pressure in the Atlantic, particularly so for northern parts of the country, I would have thought with them. But for southern areas, probably still a lot of dry weather. 13 with high pressure just out to our west, low pressure to the east. So they're mainly settled, I would have thought, but a little bit on the cool side. And then 8, only 8, but in 2 weeks' time are unsettled with low pressure moving in from off the Atlantic. So the position of this high pressure is going to be critical as to the weather we get through the first week to 10 days of May. Looks like we will be on course for quite a lot of dry weather, though. It's just the position of the high pressure will determine whether it's warm, or indeed whether it could be on the cool or chilly side. We shall see. Finally, just having a look at the Beijing Climate Centre. These are 500 millibar heights broken down into 10-day periods. The first 10-day period takes us from the 26th of April to the 5th of May. The coming week to 10 days has high pressure out to our west and also to the north, bringing in a bit of a westerly flow. So a fair amount of dry weather, you would have thought, with that. Temperature probably not too far from the average. So we go through to the next 10-day period, which is the 6th through to the 15th of May, with high pressure out to our west, bringing in those westerly winds. Again, with those, once more, a lot of dry weather. The Atlantic is blocked off. Not overly warm, but pleasant enough in the May sunshine. Then we're through to the next 10-day period, which is the 16th to the 25th of May. High pressure looks like becoming centred more towards Greenland then. Low pressure out to the southwest. That could be turning more unsettled, but also quite warm. We might be pulling up some quite warm southerly or southeasterly winds there. Dare I say it, maybe even the chance of some thunder as we go into the second half of May. So it could be very warm, quite humid, but possibly unstable and thundery. And then the final 10-day period takes us from the 26th of May through to the 4th of June, with above average heights then out to the west-northwest of us, and a lot of dry weather coming through with that, possibly pulling in some cooler northeasterly type winds, perhaps. So the Beijing Climate Centre is signaling a lot of high pressure for the next 40 days, you have to say. Will be some unsettling interruptions at times, particularly in the second half of May, perhaps. But overall, I think, again, we face quite a dry and at times relatively warm sort of 40 days ahead. That's all very experimental, though. Coming back to the more reasonable time frame, we still have this uncertainty for next week in terms of the placement of the high pressure, if nothing else. The trend is towards drier weather next week, though. It looks like dry conditions are coming back yet again next week. It's where that ridge is sitting over the country next week and into the bank holiday weekend. Going to give us a lot of warm weather. Could get very warm. Go too far north, we might start to pull down those cold and northerly winds that are heading into Scandinavia. I would probably go more with the high pressure being centred over the UK and just ridging that little bit further north with the cold northerly shot pushed into Scandinavia. That's what I'd go for as the most likely option. But we can't rule out the chance of a northerly snap through the early part of May. If it did happen, it could produce some damaging night frost. But I think, yet again, how often have we said this over the past few weeks? We are probably, after an unsettled interlude that we're going through right now and into the weekend, after an unsettled interlude, I think yet again we are probably going back to high and dry conditions. And if this continuous return to high pressure dominated weather goes on into the summer, we will inevitably come away with a repeat. Well, not a repeat perhaps, but we'll inevitably come away with a second very warm or hot and dry summer. You can see it coming off if this recurring high pressure dominance continues into the summer months. I don't think there'll be any way to avoid it, really. So we shall see. We may get a change to more pronounced and continuous low pressure conditions. We did have one in the first half of March, but again, wasn't sustained more than a couple of weeks. So let's wait and see where this is going to go. But as long as this high pressure keeps repeatedly building, then chances are we may come away with another very warm and dry summer, but we'll have to see about that. Next week is looking increasingly dry, though, and I suspect probably quite warm as we get up towards the bank holiday weekend. More on that for today's third video, which will be the third May Day bank holiday weekend update, and that'll be coming up with you tonight. That's all for now, though. Thanks for watching.